Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Hamza Rifat and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Foreign Office has condemned Indian atrocities for denying veteran Kashmiri leader Sayyid Ali Gilani a proper funeral. Gilani's family wanted him to be buried at the Martyrs Cemetery in Srinagar, but the occupation authorities rejected the request. He was then laid to rest near his residence under strict military siege, and only close relatives were allowed to attend the funeral. The U.S. military says there is a possibility that they coordinate with the Taliban in their shared battle against ISIS Khorasan. Top U.S. General Mark Milley made these remarks alongside Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in their first press conference since the last troops left Afghanistan. Milley said it's unclear whether the Taliban changed from the ruthless group that they once were. The Yemeni army says at least 43 Houthis and 22 pro-government troops have been killed in renewed fighting for the strategic city of Marib. The military said the clashes erupted when the Houthis attacked pro-government positions south of the city. Meanwhile, pro-Houthi media says the Arab coalition launched dozens of airstrikes after the group captured a strategic district in Marib. Moscow says U.S. military assistance to Ukraine could make Kiev behave unpredictably in its conflict with Russian-backed separatists. In a statement, the Kremlin said it regretted the fact of U.S.-Ukrainian friendship in opposing Moscow. This comes after U.S. President Joe Biden offered Ukraine $60 million in new security assistance to help deal with Russia. India has reported the biggest single-day rise in COVID-19 infections, with over 47,000 testing positive overnight. Mexico's daily COVID-19 cases have spiked again as it logged over 1,100 fatalities and more than 17,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 89 more people lost their lives to the virus and more than 4,100 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 218 million, while the death toll is more than 4.54 million. Details after the break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. In occupied Kashmir, Pakistan's Foreign Office has condemned Indian authorities for denying veteran Kashmiri leader Sayyid Ali Gilani a proper funeral. Gilani's family wanted him to be buried at the Martyrs Cemetery in Srinagar, but the occupation authorities rejected the request. He was then laid to rest near his residence under strict military siege, and only close relatives were allowed to attend the funeral.
Sayyid Ali Gilani was a staunch opponent of India's occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. He stood for Kashmiri's struggle for their right to self-determination. Indian authorities have imposed a security clampdown in the occupied valley following his death. Troops put up barbed wire and barricades on roads leading to Gilani's house. Police said no one in the Kashmir Valley will be allowed to leave their homes, and only relatives will be allowed to visit the residence of Sayyid Ali Gilani. Thousands of security forces are immediately deployed, and mobile internet services are cut across the area.
Now, Pakistan is observing a mourning day over demise of Kashmiri leader Sayyid Ali Gilani. President Arif Alvi was among the first to pay tribute to the freedom fighter.
Pakistan's President Dr. Arif Alvi said, "Occupied Kashmir has lost the most iconic leader today," and prayed for the strength for Gilani's family. Prime Minister Imran Khan said, Gilani had struggled all his life for his people and their right to self-determination. He suffered incarceration and torture by the occupying Indian state, but remained resolute. Gilani's lifelong sacrifices. Pakistan's army chief said Gilani's lifelong sacrifices and struggle symbolize the indomitable resolve of Kashmiris against Indian occupation. General Qamar Javed Bajwa said the leader's mission will live on until the people of occupied Kashmir win their right to self-determination. Mishal Hussain Malik, human rights activist and the wife of Kashmiri leader Yasin Malik, also lauded Gilani's lifelong struggle for the people of occupied Kashmir.
He was a man of principles, a man who believed in steadfastness, who believed in liberty and freedom, and never did he for a moment stir away from his committed stance of liberation. And today, after losing him, we are all in a state of despair and mourning. And I pray to Allah Almighty to grant him the highest positions in Jannah, in heaven. And inshallah ta'ala, a day will come when his sacrifices will bear fruit. Though he left us too soon, with an unfinished dream of the free Kashmir, but a day will come inshallah, when all these struggles will bear fruit. But we will forever miss you, and we will forever follow the path and the guidance that you've given us. You are that beacon of light, that beacon of hope, and beacon of guidance. May Allah Ta'ala give patience to your family to bear this colossal, irreparable loss.
Pakistan's flag will fly at half-mast today as the nation observes a day of official mourning.
Now we have with us Dr. Syed Mujahid Gilani, grandson of the late Syed Ali Gilani and nephew of Kashmiri leader Sayyida Asiya Andrabi. Dr. Syed Mujahid Gilani, thank you for your time. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us here on Indus News. My first question, sir, to you is that Indian occupied authorities have snatched the body of Kashmiri leader Syed Ali Gilani, who happens to be your grandfather, from his family. How do you see this barbaric act?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, this needs to be understood that last rituals of any human being, be it a Muslim or any other religion, is kind of a human right. And not only human rights, this is considered to be something that is for any human being. It's quite natural to perform the last human rituals of a deceased person. For us, a person, Sayyid Ali Gilani, for us, he's a family member. But for the whole of the nation, for the Kashmiri people, he was an iconic symbol. And this is very important to understand that it was not only us, the family, who wanted to be present in the funeral, but also the rest of the Kashmiri people who wanted to be present in the funeral and perform his last rituals. For us, this is quite hurting. But I believe for the free world, this is another opportunity to speak up for Kashmir, to speak up for the human rights violations that the Indian authorities are committing in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Absolutely. And when we speak about Indian atrocities, New Delhi has deployed large contingents of police and paramilitary troopers outside Syed Ali Gilani's home. What resistance New Delhi can now face in occupied Kashmir after his death and house arrest?
See, what is important is that Syed Ali Gilani was a very beloved leader of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. For us, he's a family, true, but for the Indian authorities, he's kind of a name, an icon who can actually create havoc in the Indian authorities. And the most important thing is, the most important reason that Indian authorities stole the dead body of Syed Ali Gilani and buried him in the dead of the night was actually to avoid congregation of the people. The Indian authorities wanted the people to stay away from the dead body, to stay away from a funeral that could have actually resulted in more than lakhs and lakhs of people gathering together and chanting the same slogan that Syed Ali Gilani has been chanting his whole life. The most important thing at this point in time is that every Kashmiri must stand together, every Kashmiri must stand united and speak up against this Indian atrocity.
Absolutely, there's absolutely no doubt about that. So how much do you think the Kashmiris' movement for freedom will be affected after Gilani's death?
See, the most important thing is, once again, that Syed Ali Gilani has been a leader. And a leader is somebody who actually trickles down whatever he has into the newer generation. And the newer generation at this point in time in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir knows what to do. They know their vision, they know their destination. And the slogan that Sayyid Ali Gilani has been chanting, that Hum Pakistani hai, ye Pakistan hamara hai, is the clearest of all visions that he could have actually trickled down to the newer generation. For us, yes, we have lost somebody who was very, very, very dear to us. But for the Kashmir cause, this is going to be a new movement.
Absolutely. And when you talk about solidarity with Pakistan, our Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced a day of national mourning. How do you see this country's support for the Kashmiri people?
See, one of the most important things, once again, is that Pakistan needs to stand with Kashmir in these times of tribulation. The most important thing, once again, is Sayyid Ali Gilani has been talking about Pakistan all his life. He has considered Pakistan as a symbol, an icon, an emblem. And the thing is that Sayyid Ali Gilani, now he's no more, but the Pakistani state needs to organize a national level funeral, be it in the Faisal Masjid, to be chaired by the Prime Minister Imran Khan, be it the Badshahi Mosque at Lahore. But we, the people in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, cannot perform the funeral, cannot gather over there and pay the last homage to the great leader. This needs to be done in Pakistan, in this free atmosphere where lakhs and lakhs of people can gather together and pay homage and the last rituals of the greatest leader that we had in Kashmir.
Absolutely, and I can reassure you that Pakistan will continue to stand in solidarity with the Kashmiri cause, and these condolences would actually be followed up with greater advocacy and promotion of Kashmiri rights. Now, Dr. Sayyid Mujahid Gilani, thank you so much for talking to me on Indus News. Now in Afghanistan, the Taliban are reportedly preparing to unveil their new government as the country faces an economic meltdown following the U.S. withdrawal. A Taliban leader says a ceremony is being prepared at the presidential palace, but the group did not give an exact date. The legitimacy of their new government in the eyes of international donors and investors will be crucial for the faltering economy. While the Taliban are cementing control of Kabul and the provincial capitals, they're fighting with opposition groups north of the capital. Senior U.S. military leaders have said it's possible the U.S. will coordinate with the Taliban in the fight against ISIS. Meanwhile, the Qatari foreign minister says Doha is working with the Taliban to reopen Kabul airport. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani was addressing a press conference alongside his British counterpart in Doha. In his address, Dominic Raab said there was a need to engage with the Taliban, but the UK has no immediate plans to recognize their government. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Fahad Massoud, international security analyst. Thank you for your time, Fahad. Now, my first question is, the U.S. military says it is a possibility that they coordinate with the Taliban in their shared battle against ISIS Khorasan. Do you think this potential coalition would be effective and last for a long time?
I believe it's a possibility. Considering the timeline where we stand today, it is critical for Taliban to gain acceptability from the international arena. There can be no greater possibility or greater chance for them to do this if they align themselves with the Americans. And ISIS Khorasan is a mutual enemy as we understand it now. So it will be a win-win for both. The Biden administration wants an exit from the situation that they've gotten themselves into, and they want this thing to go away. So it will be a win-win both ways. Yes, it is possible. Long term, I have my doubts on that.
All right, fair enough. Now, the Taliban have also launched their operation against the National Resistance Front in the Panjshir Valley. How much resistance the Taliban fighters can actually face there? How much can they actually resist this onslaught?
Resistance. Well, Panjshir is a cupped valley. It is closed from one end, open from the other. The Massoud clan and everybody who is there, let me remind you that it is not only the clan itself. The remnants of NDS, the remnants of RAW and ISIS Khorasan are mixed into against a mutual enemy, which is the Taliban. So they are looking forward and they will continue to forge resistance. How long will it take? I don't believe too long, because being a valley which is closed from one end. They will not have any support that's coming across from the international players, as well as we've discussed before. Taliban and the Biden administration are looking to form a coalition against this Panjshir Valley. So a reality is it may take, in my humble opinion, nothing more than a week. And Massoud himself, he's mentioned very candidly the only way he will admit or lower weapons against the Taliban is one condition only, that there is a coalition government that takes place at Kabul. Taliban are already willing for it, so I believe it will simmer down sooner than later.
Right. Fair enough. Now, as Afghanistan was also being taken over by the Taliban, Russia started, and it's actually started its military drills, along with other neighboring countries as well. What do you think the purpose of these military drills are, and how can they benefit Moscow?
Oh, well, they are aligned as per timeline with this Kabul exit of the West and the Taliban takeover. But I would rather say the Russians are looking to secure their borders. They want to ensure that they don't run into a problem of having too many refugees coming across, and in the bargain, ensuring also that there is military presence there. So they are ensuring their own security. I don't believe there's any alignment or any negative intent, as we call it, for that move. Putin has mentioned on different occasions that they will be willing to admit, or for that matter, look into the possibility of having Taliban as the primary points of contact in Afghanistan, and that is how it is. So I don't believe there is too much of an issue there.
Right. Thank you so much for joining me on Indus News. Now we have with us our correspondent Sumaira Khan, who is reporting from a strategically crucial area from Nangarhar.
Place where I'm standing right now is called Kabul Camp Samar Khel Village, and it comes in the jurisdiction of Nangarhar Vilayat, Nangarhar province, right after Jalalabad. And why it's famous? It's famous because the first initial lot of Afghan refugees, when they wanted to cross into Pakistan after the Soviets, when there was a Soviet chaos in Afghanistan, and they wanted to come to Pakistan as refugees, this is the area where they stayed here, and then they were allowed to come into the Pakistan's territory. The kind of door you can see right now, it's the door of the jurisdiction that ends after we cross into Pakistan's jurisdiction. It's kind of the door indicates the ending jurisdiction of Nangarhar Vilayat, but still we have at least a 15 kilometer road towards the Torkham border. So right now, this is the area I just wanted to report from here, that in the history of refugees, Afghan refugees, those who are still living for generations in Pakistan, they stayed here at Kabul Camp Samar Khel Village. Reporting for Indus News, Samar Khel Village, Nangarhar Vilayat, Afghanistan.
More news after the break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Welcome back. Now, Britain has announced new sanctions on Myanmar, freezing all assets of a key business associate of the ruling military junta. According to Britain's foreign ministry, the business group is involved in arms deals on behalf of the military. The UK has previously imposed sanctions on individuals and entities in Myanmar following the military coup in February. London says it will continue to target the finances of the military junta. On to the Middle East now. Yemeni army says it has killed at least 43 Houthi rebels in renewed fighting for the strategic city of Marib. A military official said 22 pro-government troops were also killed and 50 others were injured. He said the clashes erupted when the Houthis attacked pro-government positions south of the city. The official noted the rebels made progress despite losing dozens of fighters in coalition airstrikes. Meanwhile, pro-Houthi media says the Arab coalition launched airstrikes on multiple areas of the group in Marib. It said the raids followed Houthis' complete recapture of the Rabaa district located south of Marib province. Raba's capture will cut off the coalition forces' supply routes linking Al-Baida and Marib provinces. Moscow says U.S. military aid to Ukraine could make Kiev behave unpredictably in its conflict with Russian-backed separatists. This comes after U.S. President Joe Biden offered Ukraine $60 million in new security assistance to help deal with Russia. In a statement, the Kremlin said it regretted the fact that U.S.-Ukrainian friendship in opposing Moscow. Earlier, Biden met his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, at the White House. He assured Zelensky of Washington, D.C.'s firm commitment to Kiev's sovereignty and territorial integrity against Moscow's aggression. The two sides also discussed Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which Ukraine opposes. Meanwhile, Zelensky said Biden personally supports Ukraine's membership of NATO. Poland says it is taking all steps necessary to counter any threat that could take place during military exercises in Belarus. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said it is using all means to monitor the drills. The West 2021 drills will involve thousands of service personnel, including those from Kazakhstan, as well as tanks, artillery, and aircraft. The exercises organized by the Russian army will start on September the 10th. Poland is also expected to announce a state of emergency in the regions bordering Belarus. France and Germany have urged Iran to return rapidly to negotiations to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. In a phone call with his Iranian counterpart, French Foreign Minister underlined the importance of an immediate resumption of talks. A French Foreign Ministry statement said Yves Le Drian repeated his concern on Iran's nuclear activities. Iran's foreign minister said that America's illegal measures and Europe's inaction on it caused unfavorable situations surrounding the talks. Earlier, Germany also raised pressure on Tehran, asking it to resume talks as soon as possible. The seventh round of negotiations was halted for the presidential elections and a subsequent change of administration in Iran. Earlier this week, Iran's foreign minister said the talks might resume in 2 to 3 months. Israeli forces have wounded a number of anti-blockade Palestinian protesters in the Gaza Strip. Palestinian media said the soldiers fired live rounds and high-velocity gas bombs at protesters near the border fence. It said dozens of protesters also suffered the effects of tear gas inhalation, in addition to cuts and bruises. In West Bank, illegal Israeli settlers, backed by the police, stormed the courtyards of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Palestinians suffocated on tear gas as Israeli forces resorted to violence during a raid on towns in Jenin city. Meanwhile, Tel Aviv said American plan to reopen its consulate in Jerusalem is a bad idea and could destabilize the Israeli government. The consulate, which is located in occupied East Jerusalem, has long served as an autonomous office that oversees U.S.-Palestinian diplomatic relations. India has reported over 47,000 new COVID-19 cases, its biggest single-day rise in 2 months, while Mexico logged nearly 1,200 daily deaths and more than 17,000 infections. Globally, the coronavirus death toll is over 4.54 million, while the caseload has surpassed 218 million. More in this report.
A new study has shown that being fully vaccinated against COVID-19 not only cuts the risk of catching it, but also of an infection turning into long COVID. It shows that in the minority of people who get COVID despite 2 jabs, the odds of developing symptoms lasting longer than 4 weeks are cut by 50%. But unfortunately, the gaps in vaccination rates in rich and poor countries continue to widen. Amid that, a new report suggests the US has thrown away at least 15.1 million doses of vaccine since March 1st. Meanwhile, Cuba says it plans to vaccinate children aged 2 to 18 with its domestically developed vaccine. In Europe, Spain says it has achieved its goal for August to fully vaccinate 70% of its population.
tenemos más de 33 millones.
We have more than 33 million, to be exact 33.3 million people fully vaccinated. We have not yet reached the final goal, but obviously this is a very important intermediate goal. That means we have a broad vaccination coverage, and that puts Spain as a world reference.
The United Kingdom says about 500,000 severely immunosuppressed people in the country will be offered a third vaccine dose. This comes as the European Centre for Disease Prevention said there is no urgent need of booster doses to fully vaccinated people. The World Health Organization also said well-vaccinated countries should prioritize COVAX over booster shots.
First, we call on countries that have contracted high volumes of vaccines to swap near-term delivery schedules with COVAX and the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, or AVAT. Second, we call on vaccine manufacturers to immediately prioritize and fulfill their contracts to COVAX and AVAT, and to provide regular, clear supply forecasts.
The WHO has launched a global data hub in Berlin to analyze information on emerging pandemic threats, filling the gaps exposed by COVID-19. Meanwhile, Moderna says it is working with Japan to recall 3 vaccine batches. Earlier, it was revealed that contaminants found in vials were particles of stainless steel. However, the Japanese Health Ministry said it did not expect that this would pose health risks. In Australia, doctors warn the hospitals are not ready to cope with the government's reopening plans, even with higher vaccination rates.
Now in Pakistan, the coronavirus has claimed 89 more lives over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has reached 25,978. The ministry also said more than 4,100 tested positive for the virus overnight. It said the caseload has exceeded 1.16 million, while over 1,048,000 have recovered. Nearly 92,000 people are currently suffering from the disease in Pakistan. The ministry says more than 4,700 of them are in critical condition. Meanwhile, the number of fully vaccinated people in the country has surpassed 18 million. At least 4 civilians have been killed in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo when militants ambushed a convoy and set fire to the vehicles. Authorities said around 80 people were taken as hostages in an attack on a convoy of about 100 vehicles. They said the convoy was traveling with army protection on the road between cities of Beni and Butembo. They said army has freed more than 50 of the hostages in Ituri province, and operations are underway to recover the remaining captives. They also said a Ugandan terrorist group named as the ADF, Allied Democratic Forces, carried out the attack. Staying with Africa, in Nigeria, gunmen have kidnapped 73 students after storming a high school in northwestern state of Zamfara. In a statement, the police said rescue teams are working with the military to try to release the students. Officials said nighttime travel restrictions were imposed in the state and schools were temporarily closed. This is the latest incident in a spree of mass abductions in the region. Kidnapping for ransom by armed gangs locally known as bandits has become a grim trend in northwestern and central Nigeria. More than 1,000 students have also been abducted this year alone. Most of them were later released. The United Nations has urged all parties in the Tigray conflict to allow passage of aid to 2.5 million people in the region. The UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said the aid blockade is bringing millions of people to the brink of famine. The agency said that logistical and bureaucratic hurdles are making passage into the region extremely difficult. However, the Prime Minister spokesperson has once again dismissed allegations that the Ethiopian government is blocking the aid. War broke out in November between Ethiopia's federal troops and pro-Tigray People's Liberation Front forces. Thousands have died and more than 2 million people have been displaced. China has warned the U.S. that their strained relations could undermine the mutual efforts against global warming. Foreign Minister Wang Yi made the remarks during a virtual meeting with U.S. climate envoy John Kerry. He said cooperation on climate change cannot be separated from the broader relationship. Wang called on Washington to take steps to improve ties. He added that the U.S. should stop regarding China as a threat and an adversary. For his part, Washington's climate envoy encouraged Beijing to do more to reduce emissions. In a statement, the State Department said Kerry affirmed America's commitment to cooperate with the world against the climate crisis. Staying with America, at least 9 people have died due to the harsh weather conditions from the remnants of Hurricane Ida. The governors of New York and New Jersey declared state of emergency as record-breaking rains lashed the East Coast. Officials say the storm spawned at least 1 tornado and caused heavy flooding. Authorities in New York City suspended all train services due to severe weather, trapping commuters stuck between stations. The city's mayor, Bill de Blasio, told the people to stay off the roads and subways. Over in New Jersey, a catastrophic tornado ripped apart at least 9 homes in the community of Mullica Hill in the state. Meanwhile, the National Hurricane Center has warned that another storm, Larry, has strengthened into a hurricane over the eastern Atlantic. It says it could intensify further into a major hurricane by Friday night. More news from America. The Caldor fire in California has left the resort town of Lake Tahoe unscathed as flames crept on towards Nevada. President Joe Biden has approved a declaration of emergency in California and ordered federal assistance to boost the firefighting efforts. The fire has charred more than 204,000 acres of drought-parched timber in California. In all, it has forced an estimated 50,000 people to flee and destroyed at least 729 structures. Most of them are single-family dwellings. Meanwhile, 34,800 more buildings have been listed as threatened throughout the fire zone. Ireland has imposed a fine of $267 million on messaging service WhatsApp for breaching EU data privacy laws. The fine was imposed by the Data Protection Commission. This marks the largest fine ever imposed by the Commission and also the second largest penalty under European Union data laws. Besides imposing the fine, the Commission also ordered WhatsApp to comply with EU data protection laws and to enforce corrective measures. We'll be right back with more updates. After this break, stay tuned to Indus News. Time now for some commercial updates. The American stocks have gained steam after weekly jobless claims came in slightly better than expected. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose close to 0.5% higher at open. The S&P 500 also landed in the positive category, opening more than 0.25% higher, whereas the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite rose over 0.25% higher at open. Meanwhile, oil prices have risen, supported by a sharp decline in American crude stocks and a weaker dollar. Now let's take a look at the weather report. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.